Self-respect? Can you say that again?
Maybe how we know movement to set our ego aside
Hmm.
versus to try to hold up.
11. Hello, hello. Evan, how old are you?
Hello, question.
Hello, Irania.
Finish my question today. Really appreciate it. Just like what everybody was.
Self-respect. Okay, let's talk about self-respect a little bit. Before that, though, let me just say that this is our last meeting. The following week is the finals week. So this is it. You have any questions? Good. Yes.
What was the policy about labor?
I'm sorry?
What was the policy about labor?
Hello. Good work. Just turn him in. I'll give you a D. Maybe a C. Who's Anthony? Why are you sitting over there?
Oh, I took some medicine that made me go to the bathroom.
Oh, you could just be in the class. Okay. uh, it's a really, really tough question. So there is a part of you that is the creation of your environment. That the way you respect yourself is by doing what your parents ask you to do, and you do it, and you do it really, really well. And they kind of applaud you for that. And then your value as a human being, when you're a kid, I suppose, or even as a young adult, it just goes up. Thank you for listening to me. You did a great job. You know. Then you do what most of us in this class do. You know, you go to school, you do as your instructors ask, and after 2, 3, 4, 5 years, you have a couple of degrees under your belt, and one day you look at these pieces of paper and you say, I'm very proud of what I've done. You know. So I guess the first point is there's a good portion of who and what we are that revolves around society and it's a structure. In other words, we live in the gaze of other people. And if, for example, you enjoy the music that Snoop Dogg creates, for example, and you want to be like him and you mimic him, and by chance you run into him and he says, wow, it's really a good piece of music, even though it's crappy, okay? The fact that you have loved Snoop's creativity and he's applauded you for you being such a creative musician, for example, that inflates the way you respect yourself, okay? So a good portion of who and what we are really depends on our environment and who we emulate. Society also creates various agendas or goals for us, that you should be unique, you should be creative, you should be this, you should be that. You should get married and never divorce, for example. And so you get married, life happens and things don't end up well and you divorce. Okay? And you realize there's a tradition, and that tradition has a certain philosophy, and that philosophy says only death do us part. You're not yet dead. I mean, they're not talking about emotional death or an intellectual death in the relation. They're just talking about physical death, when you just die, And so you realize that it's gotten to a point where you just can't stand your companion. So you file for divorce, let's just say. And then you realize, because you have lived with this philosophy of life, only death do us part, but you've taken this step to kind of dismiss that philosophy, okay? And you are annulling your marriage. You one day look at yourself in the mirror and you say, you've stood against God, against your parents, against religion, against philosophy, and you're divorced in a very untimely fashion. And so something happens to your image. It cracks up a little bit, and it takes time for you to recover. You also have this other version to you, which is, after some time you become aware of, you live in this container of time. Time is something you never really greatly thought about or were mindful of or aware of. And it was just something there, You were a child, now you become a young adult, now you become an adult, you just do what other people do. At a certain point, you look yourself in the mirror and you realize you're no longer 5 or 10 or 15 or 20. And your relationship with time is slightly different now, okay? And you examine all the things you have done and all the choices you've made within this container of time, and you begin to lose a lot of respect for yourself because you wasted a good amount of your life on just doing frivolous things. And now you have a different perspective on time. You give it a sort of value that you didn't when you were younger. And I guess the point I'm trying to make, as you move into different stages or phases of life, you look at yourself differently, and you look at your physical space differently, and you look at time differently, and you look at your agendas differently. And you set yourself goals. When you reach them, your self-respect goes up. When you don't reach them, your self-respect goes down. And you know the story better than I, the story that told to us by Jean-Paul Sartre, No Exit. Really, a good amount of who and what you are depends on how other people see you. The only problem with that is, if you hang out with losers, you're having losers' judgments upon you, if you value the opinions of losers. If, on the other hand, you hang out with people who have some maturity to them, then there's a good chance they're going to make you feel bad for who and what you are, but in you feeling bad, it becomes like a competition. You strive to become better. As far as the second part of your question about, I got your email and you're fine. Okay. As far as the problem of ego, was it? Is that what you said? Or pride? I've been in the classroom for many, many, many years now, 3 decades now, 33 years. People ask a lot of silly questions. In fact, they're not silly, they're just stupid. They're just very stupid questions. And when you don't respond to the questions, or we don't go into the questions as in depth as I usually do, I hope at least, the questioner feels offended because they assume that the question is really, really important and interesting and profound, and in fact they're not. You know, it's like, you know, you hang out with a 2-year-old, and 2-year-olds have a lot of questions. Let's just say, and they're not high, let's just say, and they're sober, and they ask questions and they think those questions are interesting. You know, why is Spider-Man, you know, more powerful than like Superman? And when you don't say, oh, please leave me alone, say, no, my question is really, really important. And so when you don't answer those questions, you know, they kind of sit and cry. They think, again, like the rest of us, that our agendas are really, really important. It takes really a long, long time for you to cultivate or to become someone in whom pride is a healthy element to have. I mean, consider this book, the Gospel of John. I mean, there are, even though they were supposed to talk about this stuff, but we haven't, but nevertheless, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. These are what we call the canonical Gospels. These have been tested by the Nicene Church around the 4th century. They dismissed all the other 40 Gospels. They said, you know what? Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Mark is about 40 years old after the death of Christ. Matthew is about 60. Luke is about 70. And John is about 90 to 120 years after the death of Jesus. Now, let me give you a human being who has a healthy dose of pride inside him. If I was to give you the Gospel of Matthew, the Cliff Note version, the idiot's version, it would be the following. The Gospel of Mark is the Gospel of a man who's been misunderstood throughout the entire book. No one understands him. No one can figure this guy out. Near the end of the book, there's a Roman guard by the name of Centurion. And that should kind of make you question a little bit. Why is it that this is a man who appears at the age of 30 in the book? There is no virgin birth in this book. There is no before Adam I was, I am the light, I am the bread. None of those things exist. In the Gospel of Mark, what you have is a guy entering the scene at the age of 30, goes to somewhere, reads a passage from Isaiah, gets rejected, is followed by some disciples, gets betrayed by them, does all sorts of magic tricks for them. They just don't get it. And near the end of the book, there is only one man, Centurion, who says, you are the Son of God. And he dies a miserable death in the Gospel of Mark. You know. Hello. Then you have the Gospel of Matthew. You know, this is a gospel that's mainly written for the people of his own tradition who are the Jewish folks. They don't get it either. In the Gospel of Mark, Jesus refers to himself only twice. I am this and I am that. That's it. Only twice. Okay. And he tells story after story after story after story. In other words, he's come to realize that first, despite all the wisdom that may live inside you, you can't tell wisdom or you can't express truth in a linear way. You got to tell stories. That's the only way people can get it. That's the only container for wisdom. You know, it's not like, how do I get to San Francisco? Well, go on 80, Bay Bridge, and you're there. It doesn't work that way. You know, it's like you have to go through the entire alphabets to get to Z. That's what you have in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. In the Gospel of Matthew, what you have is, again, Jesus feeling betrayed. He comes to realize that Jewish folks are stupid. They just don't get it. He feels abandoned and betrayed by them. But he says, I am, only 5 times in that book. Only 5 times. In the Gospel of Luke, he comes to realize that the closest people don't really get him. His own people don't get him. And the Gospel of Luke is a universal Bible, gospel, in the sense that he says, you know what, like Malcolm X. You find my door, knock on it. If the door is open, you can come in. I don't really care what your skin color is. You can be white, you can be blue, you can be black, you can be brown. You can have no color. It doesn't really matter. My only agenda is your ears. Are they open enough to hear? You know. And even in that book, he comes to realize that despite, you know, keeping your door open and having all sorts of people walking to listen to you, no one gets it. Now what you have, and remember, in these three gospels, all you have is a man just telling story after story after story, synoptic gospels, which means that you have three gospels that look very much alike. Okay. The Gospel of John is very, very, very different. This is a man who is profoundly evolved, very insightful. He understands himself, but more importantly, he understands people. He comes to realize that words don't go very far. People don't really understand. People don't really care to understand. How many of you in this class have ever fallen in love, have been broken by love, and taken the time for the next 5 years to sit and break open this thing called love, to see what lives inside it, and then understand human nature, and then understand romance, and then understand the culture's forces and its impact on the way we see love and experience romance? None of us do. It's too much work. The only thing that we enjoy is being an emotional junkie. We just like the romance. Don't tell me if I understand it. That's a waste of my time. If I come to class, don't ask me, why do I love my companion? That's invasion of personal space. What you realize in the Gospel of John is a man, Jesus. He understands that human beings are just fucked up. They just don't get anything. So you know what he does? It's the only gospel in which you will never find a story, not a single story in that book. Talking to people is a waste of time. What I will do, he says, he doesn't really say, I'm paraphrasing, is just going to come to class. Go like this. Everybody can see my hand being empty. And all of a sudden produce a box of Krispy Kreme's donuts. What you have now is perplexity, amazement. People are mystified. He had nothing, now there is something. How is that? What you now have are followers. Not followers who understand, but simply followers. And again, they don't follow because they've gone home, thought about the stories. They're going to come to class, and all of a sudden they're in the presence of a magician. In that book, what you have a man who understands who and what he is, and he understands also how human beings are, and he understands the nature of politics. In that book, Jesus refers to himself 50 times almost. 50 times. I am this, I am that, I am this other. If you're that great, how come you don't mention those things in the Gospel of Mark or Matthew or Luke? It is true that these books were written for different audiences, but the ultimate, for me, the way I see these books is that this is a man who truly understands. And he's not ashamed of expressing what he understands and the way he understands it. Now, let me give you another aspect of a healthy dose of pride that can live inside you. Remember, most of us have false pride. False pride in the sense that we're not really good at anything. It's like, forgive me for those in this class who have journals, right? You're just a kid. Things happen to you. You're like pregnant with emotions. You don't really know what to do with all these emotions. So you bathroom them. You shit them. That's what journals are. You shit out your emotions on a piece of paper, and you think them to be immensely and enormously valuable, when in fact they really aren't. They're just like child's play, but nevertheless. So false ego has to do with the fact that you're young, you don't know anything. It's like, some in this class never showed up to class, you haven't done any work, and you send me an email saying, I need an A or a B or a C. Are you kidding me? I don't even know you. I don't even care for you. You don't even do anything. You haven't done anything. You haven't come to class, and all of a sudden you expect what? Miracles? Who the hell do you think you are? So, well, I'm a human being. Okay, fine. Repeat the class then. So false ego has to do with the fact that you're dealing with very unaccomplished people. And yet they don't really feel unaccomplished. They assume that just because they breathe and just because they shit, they deserve happiness. A healthy dose of ego comes to us again, within the context of Christianity, but through the words of this wonderful Russian thinker by the name of Fyodor Dostoevsky. For those of you who've read the Gospel of Matthew and who've read the Gospel of Luke, there are the three temptations, but the temptations are in different orders in these two different Gospels. Matthew tells us these temptations in one way, Luke tells us these temptations in a different way. Again, if you look at these books very closely, you realize that the image of Judas changes in each of these four Gospels. In the Gospel of Mark, he's kind of innocent, but by the time you get to the Gospel of John, he's just pure evil. Okay. You're Ruby, right? What's your last name? Okay. Is this like going anywhere? Should I stop? Evan? Yeah. The names Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John were inserted much later. So it took about 400 years for these books to come together, the 27 books of the New Testament. There was a French guy by the name of Irenaeus. He was ultimately in the position of power to choose which of the four books are going to be canonized or accepted by the church. And the Gospel of John took a while, but eventually they, and their only reason is because the Old Testament had argued that there are four corners to the world, north, west, east, and south. As I said, 3 books is not enough, we need 4 books. So that's number one. By only accepting 4 books, they rejected all the other versions of the Jesus narrative. The Gospel of Infancy, the Gospel of Judas, the Gospel of Mary, the Gospel of Barnabas, the Gospel of Barabbas. And you can find these Gospels in Persian, in Arabic, in Greek. But there were a couple of guys who have done incredible research. One is John Mayer, and the other is Bart Ehrman. And they have these books, the Gnostic Gospels. And you can find various versions online or on paper, hardback, paperback. You can buy them. Just the Gospel of Mark, there are about 5,000 different versions. Some are very different. Some are only different in punctuation and spelling. But yeah. Yes, Eva. Okay. Yeah. All right.
The idea of like Judeo-Christian or Ashton, like medieval, like believe actually. What are your thoughts?
So, do you have children? And forgive my relatively infantile response to your very complex question. When your child is small, like 2-3 months old, sometimes you just got to leave them be naked because of rash and all that stuff. And you don't find an element of shame inside them. They can just move around, their legs are open, and they do all sorts of things. They pee on themselves, sometimes they pee on you. Time passes, they're now 1 or 2, and they can walk. They just enjoy running around the house naked. And you keep telling your kid, your stuff is like moving up and down, it's kind of painful. Just put some underwear on. No. Then time passes and they haven't yet been contaminated by the dualism of their parents or society. For them, most of the stuff is quite organic and natural. And then despite all of your effort to make them feel bad about some of their behavior, they're like 9 or 7 or 8. You've told them a few things about, the human body. They should keep certain things private. But once in a while you catch them. They take a shower, they run around. Again, they're naked. And you may experience this in your young niece and nephews. And then at a certain point, the father or the mother sits the 10-year-old down and says, listen, you're no longer 2. Let me tell you a little bit about the American culture, about consumerism, about capitalism, about how everything in this culture is being sold to us through the human body, i.e. sex. Let me tell you that your body is valuable, sacred. And so what you're trying to do is you're trying to get rid of their naivete, i.e. their innocence, and contaminate them by a certain philosophy. And you contaminate them for good reason. You know that life is dangerous, especially if you have girls. You know that men are vultures, and you try to protect them. So all of a sudden you inject inside their soul 2 different value systems. One system is all about the evils of life. The other is if you're able to sacrifice certain temptations, and if you're able to overcome certain temptations, there is a reward waiting for you. Me, as your mom, would applaud you. As your instructor, I'll give you an A. And all of a sudden, good, bad, right, wrong, yes, no, come into the picture. And religion is no different. Initially, there is no bad, there is no right. There is no animal rights. You come into this life naked. There are Godzillas walking around everywhere. You're about to be eaten. The idea of you walking around with a plaque saying, animals have rights, you got to be stupid. So the only thing you're looking for is, where is my dagger? Let me create a dagger to kill as many animals as I possibly can. The idea of domesticating an animal is not evil. You domesticate animals first because they protect you, second because they feed you. So if you were to remove freedom from animals, it's your right. Okay. At a certain point, something about you happens. Now, 2 things can happen. Go back to the first time you fell in love and you walked into this relationship naively. You gave 110% of who and what you are to your companion, only to realize after a while, he is not worthy of you. That understanding also made you realize a couple of other things. The most important, people are not meant to be trusted. But loneliness also sucks. When you have recovered from the first relationship having gone bad, you go into the second one. But now you're much more cautious, you're much more aware, and you're much more mindful of the hurt that could come your way. In the Jewish tradition, there was no dualism. You die and that's it. You go into a place called Sheol. For the Bedouin tradition in Saudi Arabia, there is no heaven and hell. There's a guy whose name is Muhammad. He comes down, he says, listen, you may not resurrect with your physical body, but your soul will stand before God, and God will ask you some questions. It's problematic, all that stuff. Your soul standing before God and God condemning you, okay? But nevertheless, the point I'm trying to make is you have this thing called evolution. Evolution means growth periods. In the infancy of human evolution, you just live your life, you do the best you can, and then you die, and that's it. The power of imagination, the power of experience, creating imagination, you have a brand new philosophy of life. Somehow, evil people need to justify themselves. It's kind of like your boyfriend just leaving you for no good reason. And you're going to say, well, I wish you well. No, you don't wish them well. You wish them hell. It's called justice. And so all of a sudden what you realize is that's what religions do. The world is tough, it's complex, some people get away with certain things, and so you create certain philosophies of life. Are they true? I don't know. I'm still alive. I haven't experienced hell or paradise. What I can tell you though is the following. From the moment you wake up to the time you go to bed, you struggle to find a morsel of comfort and solace and happiness. Just a tiny bit, 5 minutes. For those of us who've been parents, we'll tell you. From the moment you wake up, these kids will be nagging you until the time they go to bed. If you're lucky, around 10:15, your 6-month-old or 6-year-old says, I think I'm tired, I want to take a nap. That 15-minute nap is paradise for you. So some guy like Omar Khayyam would say most of life is struggle, and all struggle requires effort, and effort is tough. It requires sacrifice, it requires awareness. Consider that to be your hell, and its outcome is unknown. Heaven or paradise, a moment of peace. How it comes to you, who the hell knows? Yeah, tell me.
Do you think that we indeed get away with things, or do you think that we reap what we sow?
People live a long life now. Ronald Reagan, politicians are all the same. They're all cut from the same cloth. But he did really a lot of awful things, okay? And you would hope that once you're on your deathbed, you're a little older, you're a little sicker, and you know that your time is slowly up, that your age, the time factor, the sickness factor, they will all come together and force you to reflect on all the things you have done in your life. Maybe you drank too much, maybe you smoked too much, maybe you hurt a lot of people, right? And then on your deathbed, that's your baptism through fire. Lots of regret, lots of remorse, lots of repentance. But something really strange happened to Reagan, to anyone who has a good amount of power in life. He began to slowly forget. He became like Bruce Willis. He suffered from dementia. He forgot. And when you forget, you begin to lose all the stories that live inside you. There are no consequences, And look, Friedrich Nietzsche did not like religion. And part of the fact that he didn't like religion was it didn't allow people to express the genius that lived inside him. There are lots of flaws in that particular way of thinking. Consider the following. Who talks more in this class? I do. Why do I talk so much in this class? I'm the instructor. What does it mean to be the instructor? It means that I'm in charge of guiding this class. I have power. What do I do with this power? I talk and you get bored. What else do I do with this power? I don't care about your life. I'm going to go to Canvas. If you haven't done the work, I will fail you. Now, in your world, that is called injustice. That is called the lack of compassion, generosity, understanding. Okay? So, how do you compensate for that? the fact that I am powerful and you have no power? Well, you have your Facebook page. You can gossip to your friends. You can go on your Tinder profile or whatever, you know, and you can say all sorts of nasty things. You can gossip your way away. And so the point I'm trying to make is this idea that those who have power and they use their power in a negative way to harm other people somehow must repay for all the evils that they have done. In as much as I like that philosophy, I think it's a little dishonest, and let me tell you why. You know much about redlining? Redlining. So it means the following, for those of you who may not know. And I'm going to just kind of change some of the components, but imagine that there are 5 or 10 or 20 Caucasoids living in a gated community. Okay. And let's say I'm from Iran, and I am. And through hard work, I put myself to school. I become a cardiologist. I go to school for another 5, 6, 10, 20, 50 years. And I become a surgeon. I open your chest, I go inside to figure out what the hell is wrong with your heart. And I make some money, and I save some money, and I look around Oakland and I say, that's a gated community, and I like living there. I look around, the houses are beautiful. I don't know who lives in those houses, but the houses look beautiful. And I buy a house, and all of a sudden I begin to get to know my neighbors. None of them look like me. And in fact, I come to realize something really interesting. They don't like me as a neighbor because I don't look like them. Now, I bought this house for $1 million. Now, believe it or not, there is an image above my head. Can you see it, Tammy? Above my head.
The halo?
The image is, you got to accept the fact that you have a history. That history follows you. It doesn't matter if you were born today or tomorrow or 5 years ago or 20 years ago or 1,000 years ago. I'm from the Middle East. Do you know what happened in the 12th century? People from Europe killed a lot of Muslims. Do you know what happened in India? A lot of Muslims killed a lot of Indians. Do you know what happened in year 2000? Muslims demolished the Twin Towers. Do you know what happened to the blacks, to the reds, to the browns? Well, the white folks demolished them. And what you realize is that it doesn't really matter if you were born in 2025 or 2000 or 900 years ago. The truth is, wherever you go, history follows you. I have a history, and that history walks into that neighborhood. People just don't see a cardiologist. They see a man from the Middle East. And I go around and I tell them, just in case you have any heart issues. You know, I work at Kaiser downtown San Francisco. Give me a call. Maybe I can give you some insights. But that's not what they see. They see, and I don't know if any of you in this class know much about sociology or anthropology. For the longest time, you know, people who look like me are categorized as barbarians. We are called Mongoloids. Mongoloids. They don't see a cardiologist, they see a Mongoloid. They see a Muslim, they see a potential terrorist, they see someone who's going to ruin their community. Add to the fact that these are white folks, very private, nobody ever visits them, their blinds are always shut. I am from the Middle East. Every day I have thousands of people coming to my house. We just have open door policy. Okay? But our neighbors look at this and say, I think they're plotting against us. So you know what they do? One by one, they'll sell their house. And as buyers come into this community, they realize there is a Middle Eastern there. They say, $1 million price tag for this house, not worth it. There's a Middle Eastern there. You know what? I'll buy it for $500,000. Sold. How much have you lost? You bought the house for $1.5 million. No one's going to buy that price now. Now you sell it for 500. And all of a sudden, you realize the gates are falling apart. Security no longer roams around. The grass is no longer mowed. It's a filthy environment now. At a certain point, I sit back and I ask myself, this property used to worth $2 million. Now it's less than 200,000. And the reason is those people. I wonder if they're going to pay a price for what they have done. And the answer is, why should I think that? I think this idea of justice and injustice have to do with your position in life. If you happen to be on the position of the weak, and if you have no power to correct some of the wrongs imposed upon you by the powerful, you have no choice but to have a very dualistic approach. If on the other hand, you happen to be in a position of power, a couple of things happen. You get drunk with power. It takes a long time for you to sober up. No different than consuming a lot of alcohol. By the time you sober up, and consider, for example, do you know St. Paul? St. Paul had a different name initially. His name was Saul in the Christian tradition. Sin, S in Hebrew, means poison, fangs of a serpent. And what was Saul's occupation? You go around and you kill the new converts. Those who have become a Christian, kill them. Because you're supposed to be a pagan. You have a duty towards the Pharaoh and the pagan gods. There comes a point as Saul is walking, he has an experience. It's like you're walking, you're just an idiot, and you run into Angela Davis. And she sits you down and says, where are you going? What are you doing? And he says, well, I'm going to a concert, Beyonce and Taylor Swift. Why are you wasting your time? Come with me home and I'll tell you what a good time looks like. And she gives you some Black Panther philosophy and philosophy of life and all that. And so Saul has an experience of Jesus Christ, has a vision. And his name is immediately changed to Paul, because Pe means becoming a spokesperson for someone who has some things to offer you, some truth, insights, wisdom. So it took a while for Saul to use his power in a way that's beneficial to everyone. I don't know if there's a God. I don't know if there's a heaven or a hell. I do know in society there are two forces: those who are weak and those who are powerful. Those who are born and they're unattractive, i.e. ugly. Those who are born and they're attractive, i.e. attractive. Those who are attractive, they get a lot of customers. Those who are not very attractive, they become very good students, maybe. Those who are attractive have a lot of power. Those who are not very attractive, they'll be lucky if they can find a date once every 5 years. Is it fair? No. Is it just? No. Is it right? No. But is that life? Yeah. Yeah.
Would you say, like, the idea that if you're attractive, then, like, stuff will come easier to you in life? And so let's say, like, in high school and college, you kind of just, zone out. As you said, people come to you easily, you just kind of party and enjoy your life, right? Then you hit a certain point, let's say you're 40, starting to age, you're slowing down. Would you say that then the people who are quote unquote less attractive is worth more like successful in school who have maybe not built up some amount of life that the other person didn't, been more successful.
I can't say I understand the question, but let me give you a scenario which may or may not have anything to do with your question. Okay. In year 2000, this is before any of you were born, with the exception of a couple. It was a summer class. I was teaching at Sierra College. Temperature, summertime, gets to be 110. It's really, really hot. And so I had an evening class, world religions. About 100 students. All of a sudden, the class starts at 6 o'clock. The student walks in late. It's about 6:20. She comes in with a two-piece bikini. Can you imagine that? Picture that. Two-piece bikini. I look at this and I say, what the hell? Why would you walk into a classroom with a two-piece bikini? I mean, I understand the one-piece bikini, but a two-piece bikini? You know. I mean, I would even understand no bikini, but a two-piece bikini is... And so she comes in, and she's very, very distracting to everyone. At a certain point, like you and many others in this class, she raises her hand, and she says, I have a question. And then the tone of her voice, and then the way she expressed her question, and then the question itself. It was as if the way she presented herself within the context of asking the question, when you looked at her, you felt as if she's fully clothed. She's not wearing a bikini at all. She's like wearing a burqa. Okay. Maybe if you were to go out with a 20-year-old, a 20-year-old will find you very attractive. If you were to go out with a 45-year-old, that probably after 10 minutes come to realize you're not worth their time. You know. So a good amount of your value really depends on who you're around with. You know. Sometimes when you speak about a 40-year-old being attractive, all of a sudden there is this inner chaos that you look yourself in the mirror, like a Kim Kardashian. She has all the money, she has the look, she has all the men, she knows Brad Pitt, and she knows, you know, all these good-looking folks. At the same time, she feels deficient enough to put herself back to school, and she wants to become a lawyer. Why would she want to do that? I mean, she may or may not be good, that decides the point, but the question is, why would she, despite having all this money, all the looks, all the men, all the mansions, you know, that feel not so efficient, to want to put herself back to school, sit with 20-year-olds and go home and study? Why would she feel that? Because there's a part of her that feels unattractive and ugly. And it's the domain of all of us, really. No one is exempt from it. Evan. Ruby. Anything?
Well, like you want me to ask a question or you want me to give insight?
No insight. Just
No
a question.
insight?
Yeah.
Cool.
I mean, if you don't have a question, that's fine.
Yeah, I'm just.
Okay.
Do I have a question?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was actually further back, when she was talking, so I didn't want to interrupt you, but when you were talking about like pride and, basically, I guess my question is like, when does it become like sinful? Because in society, some people look at it as like a good character trait to have, like you're like confident, but like biblically they talk about it being like one of the 7 cardinal sins. So where does that line, like, where is it wrong?
I'm sorry, what?
Like, when do you think, like, you being prideful becomes being like sinful?
Oh,
pride?
like an obstacle. Couple of things. Sin, as well as pride, they're very organic. They're part of who and what we are. The moment you're born, sin and pride come with you. They're your siblings. The word sin basically means, have you ever been in a relationship? Were you in it because you wanted to be miserable? You were in it because you wanted to be happy. Okay. Now, there are prerequisites. In other words, there are certain things that are required for happiness, but you didn't have those requirements. So you walk into a relationship without having those components, and the end result is you being miserable. That is a sin. It means missing the mark. Every organism that comes into life, whether it's a tiger or a rat or you or me, our function is very simple. We want comfort, we want happiness, we want to be fed, and we want to be fed well. Okay. Now, you can either walk into life, okay, having the necessary prerequisites so you can get there, or you assume to have them, and then life will teach you don't really have anything. So you were born poor, you assume you're not, you're walking thinking you have, life reminds you don't have, so you spend the next 20 years of your life in therapy. That's called sin, missing the mark, okay? Now, one of the things, again, about the prodigal son in the Gospel of Luke is the following. If you are born, you have no choice but to be born in sin. In other words, you come into life without knowing anything. You will have to make a lot of mistakes. And if you pay attention to those mistakes, then eventually you will get it. Once you will get it, that becomes your promised land. I like framing. I like to build things. So when I first began framing, you think that just measuring something and then putting it under a saw, you have the right measurement. No. You think just because you buy a DeWalt nail gun and you put some nails in it, you know how to nail a 2x4. No. And I can tell you firsthand, I have probably wasted thousands of dollars making a lot of mistakes. Okay? Wasting a lot of time, lots of money, lots of trees in cutting the wrong way, nailing the wrong thing, and wasting a lot of energy dismantling the things I've made. After 20 years, now I can be a good framer, but 20 years of living in sin. But sin by itself is not enough. You catch yourself, you pay attention, you're mindful, you're aware, you take notes, and then you correct. Okay? That's the way you take yourself out of the sin. Okay? Pride. Now, your mom will tell you, you're holding the saw the wrong way. Your mom will tell you the oven is hot. Don't go near it. Your mom will tell you this boyfriend is bad. Your mom will tell you don't drop out of school. But you're 18. You're boastful. You're prideful. You're arrogant. You think you know more than your mom. Okay? Now, what your mom is telling you without really telling you is, I have been to where you've been. You know, you keep telling your mom, Mom, what the hell do you know about love? I see you go to work 9 to 5, you come home, you spend some crummy time with this man you call your husband, i.e. my father. I don't see an ounce of life, ounce of creativity, ounce of passion about you. But your mom has been bullied by life and she knows her place, and she has also been bullied by her own insights and experiences. She knows that all the things you're saying may be true, but you don't really know what you're saying. She swallows her anger. And she looks at you and says, she's 18, a piece of shit. She has a big mouth. And after a while, like the prodigal son story, she gives up on you. She says, you know what? She thinks she knows, let her go. Let her go. She wants to move out, let her go. She wants to be with that loser, let her go. And then you know what's going to happen? Your arrogance is going to carry you away from the house. You're going to continue with this man, or whatever behavior you engage in. You want to drop out of school, fine. Time will pass. And time is like a hammer. And your pride is like this mask, this arrogance. And time will, little by little, crack this hammer to your mask. And then the mask will fall off. And then you realize that you thought that you knew, but you don't. Then you will crawl your sorry behind to your mom and say, Mom, you're right, I was wrong. And you realize your mother did have a loud voice and very aggressive, very dominating, very arrogant. But that arrogance had its roots in experience, in care, in love. But you didn't see any of that. And that's the domain of every young person. And there are no shortcuts. I mean, there is one, but you wouldn't be able to take it. Let's say I was to give you a scenario. How old are you?
How old am I?
Here we go.
How old do you think I am?
We are not dating.
I'm just saying.
Let's just say you're 25. Let's just say. This is the shortcut which you won't be able to take because your capacity and your arrogance won't allow, but it's just a scenario. Forgive me, what was your name?
Veronica.
Veronica, that's right. Veronica, 25. So let's say, Veronica, I asked you, so how old are you? You say 25. You have children? You say no. Are your parents? I don't talk to them. All right. Do you have a boyfriend? Yes. How long have you been in a relationship? 5 months. What are you doing in school? I dropped up at the age of 18. I'm back in school. I want to finish it in the next 2 years. Or 3 years or 4 years. I'm taking like a class a semester. 2 jobs, whatever. I say the way you're going, it's going to take you 10 years to graduate, Laney. Normally, you're 18, you go to school for 2 years, 20, you're done with Laney, 21, 22, you're done with San Francisco. Bachelor's, 23, 24, 25, you're done with your master's. You have a job at the time you're 23, 24, the job that you enjoy, or maybe it's a part of your degree. You're making about 60, 70, 80, 90, 100,000. If you were in the tech business, you're probably making about 300,000. You have a good amount of money saved. You have a good head on your shoulder because school demands sacrifice and focus, that you have to kind of fend off temptation and pleasure so you could focus on your school, which means that you didn't really do any of that. You're 25, a good amount of regrets inside. You've made a lot of mistakes. You're 25, brain space is cluttered now. So listen, dump your boyfriend. You're not going to marry him. He's not going to marry you. Take out a lot of loan. 50, 60, 70,000. You're young enough, you can pay him off easily later on. Instead of taking 6 units a semester, take 18 units a semester. Because time is against you now. You don't have the luxury of time. And since you don't know what major to choose, forget this bumper sticker philosophy of life in this day and age now. Find the thing you're passionate about. Life isn't about passion, life is about politics. You're no longer young, you're no longer attractive, you no longer have the luxury of time. Choose business for your pocket. And if you happen to be a thinker, choose philosophy for your soul. Double major. We'll try to find excuses to not do it. If I realize you're a waste of my time, I say, fine, do whatever. I'll just behave the way your mom did towards you. And then you can be 45 and come back to my class if I'm still alive. Okay. Now that is a shortcut. In other words, instead of waiting for life to smack the hell out of you, for you to be removed from sin, you give your life to me for the next like 2, 3, 4, 5 years. And when you're done, you will have your master's degree. And then you can walk back into life. And when your mind is somewhat educated, you will choose the right companion. Nothing is guaranteed. You will choose a 9-to-5 job that will deal with your pocket, your rent, a nice place to live. You will also be able to choose the right companion. And then maybe if you still like philosophy or history or psychology, you can teach a night class twice a week. Now what you have is a part of your life deals with your soul, a part of your life deals with your pocket. You have the best of both worlds. But to take that shortcut, you have to make a lot of sacrifices. And you won't be able to. So there you have it. For those of you who came in late, this is our last meeting. I'll be in my office next week. If you want to come by, send me an email. If you have any concerns, send me an email. If you've missed a lot of classes, if you've missed a lot of work, you just got to repeat the class. Do you have any questions? Any comments about anything? Abraham.
So with the video that you posted about or the audio of Confucius saying the wisdom of the cosmos and that kind of stuff, it mentions a lot about harmony and order and that kind of stuff. Do you think that that philosophy works for people who have a lot of turmoil in their inner life, like their family life? They don't have good relationships with people that are directly next to them? Or would that be a hard way for them to live because they have that sense of not despair, but you don't have that same
So listen, when I was very, very young, how old are you? Did you hear that, Veronica? So easy. How old are you? 23.
24 next.
Okay. So when I was about 19, I went out with this young woman. We cared for another. It was a good relationship for a while. But she had MS, multiple sclerosis. Okay. I didn't know what that was. I was very young. When I began to do some research, and this is before the age of the internet and all that, your neurons, the reason why most of us in this class are relatively functional is that your neurons, you have a billion of them in your brain, they're protected by myelin sheets. These are like condoms on neurons. They protect them, okay? So that messages can get to the next place very quickly and smoothly. When you have a disease such as this, the myelin sheets are all damaged, which means that I want to move, I want to come to where you are, I take a step, but the message is delayed. So my legs, okay, there is no muscle in it because you need messages to get there. And so when I take a step, it's too soft. I fall. There came a point where my parents became really, really concerned. And Middle Eastern parents are not like American parents or Western parents, some of them, which is no Middle Eastern parent will ever look at you and say, you're 18, now get the hell out. You got to pay rent, you got to pay for food, you got to do this. No, it doesn't work that way. They buy you a car, they buy you a house, they pay for your marriage, they pay for everything. Okay? I mean, your parents are a slave. The moment they have you to the time they die. That's how it functions. And so if you ask a mother, who are you? I'm a mother, that's it. I'm not a CEO, I'm not a dean, I'm not a this, I'm not a that, I'm just a mother. Okay? And so a good amount of who they are rests in who the kids are. So when they realize that my companion has MS and there's going to come a time where she won't be able to walk, to talk, to see, to think, you got to bathe her, do all sorts of things to her. They said, no, you're only 17 or 18. You're not going to do this. And so whatever harmony and comfort and respect existed in my family for 20 years, it all went out the window. This relationship, all it brought was chaos. Okay? Now, you're not yet a parent, but you got to understand that when you spend a good amount of who and what you are, you inject your dreams and hopes inside your kids. Whenever your kid gets in harm's way, it impacts you as a father or a mother. Okay? When the relationship is tight. It took me 8 years to walk away from the relationship. 8 years. When the relationship ended, chaos also ended. Couple of things. Let's say I am your dad, and every time I come home, there is chaos in your life. Now, you may assume that if you were to go to therapy while living under my roof, that chaos will eventually go away. That's not going to happen. Because therapy is a collection of bumper stickers. And these bumper stickers are going to be new. I am old. In other words, you and I have a 20-year relationship, and it's messy. You and these bumper stickers, you only have a 2-week relationship. These 2 weeks are not going to stand a chance. It's like walking into a ring with Mike Tyson, or Evander Holyfield, or George Foreman, or Muhammad Ali. You won't stand a chance. Okay? What you can do is the following. You come to a point where you realize, I have created so much mess inside you as well as outside of you. You have to reach a point of profound and immense anger and disgust for me and for yourself. You pack your stuff and you leave. The way I left in 1982, and I lived on bus benches for a couple of weeks. Okay? I just didn't want to live with my aunt. And I didn't want to live in Davis. You leave. And you got to reach a breaking point. Unless that happens, you're going to stay with me as your father. Okay? You're going to go through this agonizing period in your life. You don't have a father, you don't have money, you don't have a roof over your head, you have nothing. You're an orphan. You put your life back together somehow. You know, you work at In-N-Out, you work at Home Depot, you get yourself a room, take out loans, you go to school, but you're still, messy on the inside. You put yourself in therapy. You still love me because I've done a lot of good for you. Okay? But you also understand the difficulty of my life as your dad. You're now 45. And you've been in therapy since you were 30. 15 years of therapy. Now you begin to understand a lot of things about yourself, about me, about alcoholism, and about all those things. Me as your father have hit rock bottom. You do something really amazing. You have an in-law. You have a big backyard. You build something in the backyard. You say, Dad, you can come and stay with us. In the 20 years of our separation, you have brought harmony back to your life. You've understood. You have a lot of bumper stickers, which are no longer bumper stickers. You embody them. You live them. You know how to manage chaos. In other words, when you go out there and it's raining, you grab your umbrella. When you realize that your wife comes home and she's angry, you have your own umbrella. Stay out of her way. Let her calm down. When she's in a bad mood, you say, instead of you cooking, let's go out for dinner. Okay? If she's tired, you do all the things. Okay? These are the things that you have managed to learn. Now when I come to your place, now when I sometimes act out as a sobering alcoholic, I'm just angry, regretful, and a good amount of psychological pain, you're not going to allow my chaos to contaminate you and your life. You know how to manage them. But it took 20 years of separation for you to learn that. This stuff that most of young people talk about today, parent issues, like emotional issues, we've had these things for thousands of years. Life has never been kind to anyone. It's only maybe 2 generations or so that people are so easily breakable. If you want chaos to leave you, you have a couple of things you need to do. First, get to know history well. Not history in the terms of like taking history 17A, American history. That's bullshit. And get to know how history has been towards human beings, the sort of events that you and I have had to wrestle with for the past many thousands of years. Get to understand how emotions come to be. Do some research on philosophy, how human beings think, how thinking has evolved. You know, do some Sigmund Freud, Abraham Maslow, Carl Jung. Figure out what these therapists have had to say about human beings. Understand technology, understand capitalism, understand the impact of YouTube and shorts on how patients work, how insights work, whether or not YouTube actually works with life or not. I mean, a good amount of this really has to do with you. You just need to be a really, really good student. Once you're able to understand a good amount, then that's your umbrella. Some of the messes that come into your life, you can just umbrella them away. That's your shield. Without that, there is nothing you can do. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, you can submit it. Yeah. Yeah, you have until December 14th. I will consider it late, but you can turn them in. I mean, if you're hoping for an A, that's not going to happen. The second week, I said, yeah, I didn't say you can be late for the rest of the semester. But look, I think this should be your approach. You're a Muslim, right? So let me tell you a story from your tradition. There is this young man who enters Yathrib, and he is Muslim. And it's about noon, and he hears the call to prayer. And he says, oh, I need to run into the mosque and pray with the jama'at, with the community. But I need to tie my donkey somewhere. Otherwise, my donkey, if not feathered or tied, would run away. But I don't want to be late to the call to prayer. So he runs to the mosque without tying the donkey to some tree or something. And then he prays, and then he goes out, and the camel or the donkey or the cow is not there. And he raises his fist to the heavens. And he said, didn't Muhammad said, have faith, and faith will protect you? And all of a sudden, Muhammad comes from the corner and says, yes, have faith, but also use your brain. Tie your camel, have faith as well. So my recommendation is this. Do the work that you need to do for this class. And also have hope that maybe you'll get an A, or a B, or a C. But have both. Yeah. Irania.
So, in your video, you stated that someone needs to enter into your life and touch every part of who you are, being slowly broken and protecting you at the same time, slowly put yourself back together by yourself. What if you succeed in breaking someone to the point of no return in your artificial problems, instead of making them stronger? Because you said it was a teacher that made their lives miserable, but artificially, but they created problems that didn't exist. But what if you break someone to the point of no return while you're doing it? What if it's not strong enough?
It's such a good question.
Overlook the artificial problems.
There was a show on TV, and I recommend it. It's a beautiful. What's wrong with you? It's a beautiful show. It's called Boston Legal, with James Spader and William Shatner. It's about a law firm. It has tragedy in it, comedy in it. It really is a great show. 5 or 6 seasons. Cancel later on. But so what happened there is Alan Shore, one of the lead lawyers in the firm, and he is practicing this case with another lawyer who happens to be a young woman, very attractive. The show, of course, doesn't go into great amount of details about their relationship, but at a certain point, this woman falls in love with this man. She falls in love. I mean, 110% in love. And after a while, he looks at her and says, I really don't want to be with you. And she's devastated. She's broken. Did he show her or give her a taste of true love? Absolutely. Was he able to protect that love? No. The consequences of that was that her psyche shattered and she had to be admitted to a mental institute. And she was heavily dosed or drugged. And at a certain point, he goes, pays her a visit to free her from the institution. At a certain point, he looks at her and says, I am sorry because you gave your heart to a man who was undeserving of it. No, look. The thing is, all of us come into life empty. And people give us things, and we assume them to be valuable. Look, this class, you're here because of certain social structure.
I'm here so my student loans from my graduate program.
Look, if I may finish.
And because I like your class.
Okay, if I may finish, the point I'm trying to make, almost everything under the sun for us is artificial. What makes it real is when we feed the artificial aspect with a good amount of value, imagination, fantasies, hope, and dreams. That create identity. When something creates for you an identity, it is very, very, very real. Let's say I give you an A. I give you the illusion that you're very intelligent, when in fact you're stupid. I'm not talking about you per se, okay? So your question has to do with the following. Imagine you come to me and say, Amir, I like your class and I want to do philosophy. Now I say, Iranian, listen, when I did philosophy, I started at the age of 11. There was nothing else I wanted to do but philosophy. And if you want to do philosophy, you got to do just like me. So I cut you from your parents. I cut you from your friends. I cut you from all the goals and agendas you have in life. Okay? Couple of things. Maybe you don't have the talent that I did. Maybe you don't have the passion that I did. There are lots of moving parts here. Is it true that a teacher can drive you mad? Absolutely. Is it true that you were given the wrong philosophy of life as a guide, as a toolkit? Yeah, there are lots of ifs. Almost everything under the sun is a risk. If you want to follow Jesus Christ, is it true, kind of like the Gospels, is it true that you have to abandon your father, your mother, your brother, your sister, your wife, and your kids? The answer is yes. Is it true that because you left them, your wife may commit suicide? The answer is yes. Is it true that because your kids lost a father, they could have a mental breakdown? The answer is yes. Could Jesus be blamed? The answer is yes. All of those things are possibilities. Does that make Jesus a crummy teacher? The answer is yes. Is it true that he saved some people? The answer is yes. So Jesus works for some and he's poison for another.
Didn't answer my question.
That's the best I could do. It's good to see all of you. Have a nice break.
Thank you.
Thank you.